How are you?
What's going on?
What's going on? I love the background. That's very trippy, dude.
Thank you. Yeah, I painted that. That's
That
a
is beautiful.
well, thank you. That's an actual painting that's in my wife's 5th grade classroom.
Oh, that is awesome looking. That is awesome. Very, very cool.
Thank you. I
Nice.
appreciate it. Yeah. Well,
All
hey
right.
man, it's great to meet you. I like your
Same.
background too. You got action going on back there?
Uh, well, I'm gonna pull back the curtain. This looks real. However, it's all an
Oh,
illusion.
literally. I love it.
During the pandemic, when I started doing a lot more Zoom stuff, the green screen thing was a whole pain in the neck with,
Yeah.
pipe and drape and all that. And then I discovered, am I looking straight at you? Someone bumped my camera in here. I think it was one of my cats. Am I looking straight on
Yeah,
now?
you're
Does that,
good.
okay. Just,
Absolutely.
all right. So I'm looking down now just so I can see you. But anyways, I discovered they made pull down screens. I said, oh, where's that been all my life? Because I could keep all the stuff behind me. And then when I got to go on air, whoop, pull it down and I could, change backgrounds if I need to. But here we are.
Yeah, so if you don't want to it's that whole idea if you don't want to vacuum, just pull that rug over it. It's fine.
That's exactly what it's the digital rug. You,
I
you,
love
you are
it.
correct.
But if you wanted to get kind of aggro one day, I love the Rubik's cubes. You'd be fine. If you have 3 behind you, that's a good sign.
Okay, admittedly, for years, I've only been able to do levels 1 and 2 without needing to look at the formula. I can't get that last level.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I keep buying Rubik's Cubes thinking that it's. Now, I'll tell you why, because there was a move that I was involved with, and I was back and forth from one state to another. And at one point, I wanted one. So, let me just get one. And then I left it, and then I bought another one. So you get a collection.
That's the psychology behind it. They know that. They know that we're going for it. No matter what. Well, it's great to meet you. I appreciate your time today. And
Of course.
before we get into your life and career and what makes you who you are, how did you survive COVID? The last 3 years did its thing on all of us. We're coming out of it. We're in this post-pandemic period. How did you do and how has it changed you?
It has totally rechanged the core direction, I think, of my business. And I don't know how much you looked at my background. I have served the corporate market as a personality expert, consulting with companies to make sure they hire the right people. And obviously, when things slowed down during the pandemic, there wasn't much hiring going on. So the astrology really sort of picked up there. And I discovered that, you know what, this is probably where the future lies. So it was a very slow and still in the process of slowly pivoting directions. And here we are. So it's a matter of just showing up, putting in the work, and then seeing what flies.
So I know on paper what you do. It makes sense to me, but I'm going
Mhm.
to ask you to do this. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day. One of them looks up and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
So are you wanting that from the assessment side, the astrology side, or both?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah.
So from the assessment side, let's say you're an employer and you've got 10 applicants who you're considering hiring. You've whittled that pool down to the top 3 or 5 and you're stuck. I don't know who's the best. They all look good on paper. That's when we step in, run a series of personality and cognitive assessments on applicants, and then help determine how well a person's data maps to the specific job that they're applying for, so that the company in the end, they know who the best is out of the crop of candidates that they've got based on analytical data.
So, yeah, and so that is there. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What did you want to be in the third grade?
Oh boy, in the third grade, probably a doctor like everyone else, and then I kind of moved on. And in high school, I really got the flame ignited to wanting to understand human behavior. And that's where the crossover into the astrology world comes from. Because when you look at personality assessments and anything that tries to quantify human behavior, like it or not, they all have their roots in the astrological process. Every type of assessment, human category system, ways of describing behavior goes back over 2,000 years to where, the ancients were doing this by forecasting, by looking at the stars and planets and placements in the sky. So there's my through line. I just find people fascinating, and I love to discover and learn how it makes them think, behave, and act. And been doing that ever since.
I'm a Libra and I know all of the levels that go into Libra and the balance and all of those things. And I totally believe it. And I am one that believes that the astrological signs and how all of that comes together works for human behavior and how we interact. But let's say there's skeptics out there.
Mhm.
You're a professional. What would be one of the top empirical pieces that you would point out to a skeptic to say, this is why this makes sense and works?
So the first thing I'd say is forget about the signs like Cancer, Leo, Taurus, Libra, etc. In the type of astrology that I work with, the signs take a minimum role of importance. Now, the reason sun signs are so popular is because of Linda Goodman's work back in the 60s, who made that popular as far as writing various characteristics of what each sign brings to the party and the different traits associated with it. And that's fine. But here's the challenge: a lot of that stuff doesn't map out. So, in vibrational astrology, which is the form that I work with, our emphasis is primarily on the planetary interactions because the planets are what brings the energy to the equation. And as far as empirical evidence, that's where we're doing research to show that people with specific planetary configurations are wired to behave in particular ways. And I think in one of our communications when setting this interview up, I had mentioned there's been a tremendous amount of research done in the area of musicians. And one of the key placements for musicians is the planet Uranus, because Uranus governs the process of living in the moment. Uranus doesn't think about the past or the future. It's how do we perform now? So when we look at people like professional musicians, professional athletes, anyone who has to focus on the moment right here, you start to see configurations emerge. And due to technology now, over the past 10 years, research in vibrational astrology has really taken off because we have a database of 90,000 people with birth time, date, and location, which is critical, that we can then go and run various models on to see, hey, does this theory pan out? So the signs give a little bit of color. Libra is what the research has found in VA is that it's not so much the balance. There's some of that there, but Libras, and if you have a lot of placements in Libra, tend to want things to be fair and equal. That's the main driver. Would you say that that is the underpinnings of how you operate, that it's an equitable exchange when you're either working with someone or doing a business venture where equality is an important piece for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just, yeah. And here's the thing that blows people's minds. The signs, the zodiac, the 12 signs of the zodiac that most of us are familiar with, those definitions really didn't get started to what we're using today until like the late 1800s from the 1900s on. So that's new. So the way astrologers have typically dealt with information is, well, you learn from previous astrologers and they just pass it on down the line to you without doing any empirical research. Well, I'm a data guy and I need data. And I've always studied astrology and I found that sometimes things panned out, other times they didn't. And then I ran across this form of astrology called vibrational, as I mentioned, where the whole thing is data driven. And if the shoe doesn't fit, we don't try to crowbar it in there. And for me, that was the eye opener that said, all right, here we go. This is what I've been looking for.
So Uranus is the ultimate existentialist.
Yeah, it's like, let's just do it now, and now that gets modified, of course, depending on what other planets it's interacting with. So here's a third grader explanation. In our birth chart, we all have a snapshot of the sky at the moment we were born. So your view of the sky where you were born could be completely different from someone's view of the sky who was born on the same day at the same time in a different location. And the theory is, and I say theory because VA is an evidence-based practice. We work with the best evidence we've got. When we get better evidence, we upgrade the model. But the theory is, at the moment that we show up on this earth, when we emerge from the womb, that whatever planetary configurations are overhead are imprinting into our cosmic DNA, so to speak, what our energy process is going to be for this lifetime. And there's different configurations. You can have different angles formed by various planets, which create different type of mental circuits. And then as we go through this life, our mission is to figure out what those circuits are. And astrology just helps you get a quick indication of saving a bunch of time from having to go through banging your head against the wall to having an idea of, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. I'm better wired for certain things or predisposed for certain behaviors, and other things maybe aren't that good of a fit. So that and the thing that and our birth chart never changes, by the way. That's solid throughout your entire life. But what does change is what's happening in the sky. The planets are currently moving, they're always moving, and they're hitting or aspecting different parts of our natal chart. And that's where we experience different cycles, different moods, different opportunities, because different circuits end up getting activated depending on the aspects.
So prior to this fascination in high school, let's go back to where you were born and raised. How did
Mhm.
some of these underpinnings become central to you getting interested in astrology?
It's kind of hysterical, really. I was raised in a faith-based system where astrology was a big no-no. You can't do that. Oh, that's horrible. You're going to end up, someplace where you don't want to be. But I remember being in fourth grade. I was always attracted to things related to the mind. I remember checking a book out of the library on hypnosis. And I grabbed a friend of mine and I said, sit here, I'm going to hypnotize you. And I read what was in the book. And he went into hypnosis. I was like, this is pretty interesting. So I've always had this interest of wanting to. It's hard to put into words, but looking at the big picture, seeing how everything kind of ties together and relates. And then as I started to learn about human behavior in high school, that's what put me on the path to then get my bachelor's and master's degree in psychology. But when the astrology really started to take hold was between the years of my undergraduate and graduate training. Someone had gifted me an astrology reading with a professional astrologer. I had never had one before. I had ambivalence there with regards to, should I do this? Should I not? I had the reading and it was an eye opener because within an hour's time of this woman having nothing but my birth date, time, and location, she proceeded to tell me everything that was going on in my life up to that point, current issues that I was dealing with, and then even did some forecasting for trends ahead. And that's what really lit the fire on the astrology side of things. Unfortunately, when you go through graduate school, you mentioned the A word, they almost want to throw you out because that's the antithesis of data and analytics and all this stuff. So I kind of kept my studies quiet to myself and, started getting books. You buy one book and it's like chips. You get another one and then just take this course and you start reading this. And so it's almost like I had a dual enrollment. I've got the clinical stuff over here. I've got the astrology stuff over here. And now 20 some odd years later, there's the nexus of both of those worlds.
So who's been kind of a hero for you in your life?
Hero in what type of sense? You got to narrow that scope down a
In
little.
any sense that has motivated you and made you who you are?
Oh, that's a tough one. That's really because it depends on where we're talking. So I can remember in graduate school, there were a couple of professors who I really clicked with based on the way that they viewed the world. And rather than eliminate it down to one person, I'd say my heroes fall under the umbrella of people who question things but yet have an open mind. So, in VA, we often say we welcome the skeptics. I'm not going to fight with you on anything. All I can do is show you the data. That's wonderful. What I don't tend to like is people who are cynics and already have their mind made up. And it's like, well, this is not happening. This is ridiculous. This isn't going to work. And that's that. So when I look back at people who were influential, and a lot of them are personal folks, I mean, I don't have a famous hero, but people who I have interacted with and who have shaped me, they've always had that idea of let's be objective, but let's be open to see what could end up coming out. Because if we go back, I don't know when the X-ray came out, but I think it was in the late 1800s, early 1900s. If you were in the 1700s, it said someday there will be a device that will be able to look through your body and see your bone configuration. That person might have been, run out of town thinking that they're crazy. Well, look at the imaging we can do today. So that's kind of a thread that I always try to ground myself in, is like, we know a lot less about what's going on out there than what we do know. So the idea that, findings are coming out in quantum physics, quantum mechanics, and the whole idea of the universe being connected globally, and beyond, or interconnected, I think we're just beginning to see how all those elements start to coalesce. And it's a very exciting time.
Yeah, for sure. What is your daily motivation? What is the gas in your tank that makes you do your job and to help people and to be who you are?
Two things. Number one, at the end of the day, I got to feel like I've made some positive difference in someone's life, whether it's on the corporate side or on the interpersonal side, doing astrology work. I enjoy doing meaningful work, which is why I could never work in an organization. I mean, I tried that when I first got out of graduate school, and that didn't last all that long, which caused me to start my own company and be able to do things the way that I wanted to do them, which is a focus on making sure that we are moving the needle. So that's number one. And then the other piece of that puzzle is, from a daily motivation perspective, I always like to learn. So, they say you should learn something new every day. Well, I try to learn 5 new things every day, not deliberately, but I'm just a naturally curious type of person. So combining those two elements, the desire to want to help and serve others, in addition to wanting to learn, it's worked really well for me. And in my, making it personal, in my astrological chart, all the placements suggest those same type of elements: constantly seeking new information, wanting to bring that to a greater platform. And it's really funny when you go back and look. It's like, yeah, well, I'm landed in the right place.
So what's one of your favorite client success stories?
I had an astrology client at one point who, and I want to be very cautious here because confidentiality is
Yeah.
important. So let me just word this in a way that, there's no linkage. They were in the helping profession. I'll leave it at that. They helped other people, and they've been around a long time. And at the end of the session, they looked at me over Zoom and said, "This explains why my life has taken the path that it has, and that I'm not defective and screwed up." And there were tears. And that was like, this is why I do the work that I do, because it brings insight from a different perspective that most people don't end up having a window into. So when those moments happen, they're very powerful, they're very beautiful, and it confirms that I'm on the right path, doing the right thing.
If you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend some time with them, who would it be?
Oh, who would that be? This may sound like a little bit of a shocker, but I've always wanted to meet Snoop Dogg. I know that's
Yeah.
weird. He's just a cool dude,
Yeah, not
he
at all.
just very, very laid back, and people hear me say that, him or Howard Stern. How about that?
Yeah.
Now, to people who are recoiling when they hear that, here's an example of knowing all the information. When you think, we'll use Howard for an example, because I think everyone loves Snoop Dogg, regardless of who you are in the human race. He's just a cool guy. But
Yeah.
Howard Stern's a bit more polarizing. But here's the thing. Yeah, if you go back and look at his stuff in the 1980s and 90s, he was he was nuts, he was crazy, crude, etc. And there's still some of that there. But when you get into what he's all about and how he thinks, and the fact that him and his wife are involved in animal rescue, there's a lot more beneath the
Yeah.
surface. And I think that's kind of the overarching message that I try to convey. You got to look beneath the surface, because yeah, there's that personality that's out there on his radio show, and he's got to be entertaining, but there's a lot more there beneath the surface that often gets overlooked. So those are the two. Maybe we could have them both for dinner. That would be
Yeah,
very interesting.
that'd be a cool conversation for sure. So everyone out there, Michael, has a perception of you, your family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you're in control. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a guy who is, a normal guy who was raised by, very traditional, loving parents who always had this childlike curiosity and spark. I'm always fascinated by new things, as I mentioned earlier. So, consummate learner, very, very curious, and a desire to do good. That there have been many times on the corporate side when I had the opportunity to get involved with working on projects and companies that I took a pass on because I either felt this wasn't going to be good for the people involved. It was a conflict with my values and belief system. So in those situations, I bow out gracefully. So I really try. I think in a word would be genuine. What you see is what you get. We're talking here, and if we were out having an iced mocha cafe, lappuccino, frappe, espresso, you'd get the same guy. Genuineness and congruency has always been important to me. People who behave one way in one circumstance and then they're Jekyll and Hyde someplace else, I tend not to have much patience for those type of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Michael, if anyone wants to hire you, learn more about you, anything pertaining to your world and services, where can they go?
The easiest place is blueridgeastrology.com. That's the same moniker on all the social medias, on TikTok. I do daily updates there, Instagram, Facebook. blueridgeastrology.com will tell you more than you ever wanted to know about astrology, and I welcome the interaction.
I love it. How do you